I've always been a cynical person. At least ever since I found out how the world works and saw the gaps between the story, how it was being told, and the truth, what was actually going on. Small things at first, like the toys inside a cereal box, which promised to change your childhood life, but when opening it, it was just crap. So you were disappointed and ate even more cereal. Pretty genius, actually. And obviously later bigger things, like understanding for the first time that you and your family are actually poor and that there are people who are rich, and then understanding that most of those people's families always have been. That was a real bummer. And then the big one, meritocracy. What a joke. But to be completely honest, I never felt that my cynicism was a problem. It always felt like the only appropriate response to the world I was looking at. Also, it's fun to me. Like, those of you who follow this channel know that I love satire and cynical humor, and I love inviting people to laugh together about the absurdity of it all. But recently something changed. Something that made me feel like my cynicism is getting the better of me. I don't know how you feel about the past months, but it feels like we are approaching the end of an era. What era, you might ask? Well, the end of the human era. And for once, I don't mean that AI is taking over, not yet at least, but still the end of the human era. And in this video, I would like to share what I mean by that and why that is a problem for cynicism. Cynicism to me was always a very human thing. It actually began as a revolutionary moral philosophy in ancient Greece, not as a bitter pessimism we associate it with now. The Cynics believed that civilization, social convention, and material desire had corrupted human beings. Their solution was to live according to nature, reject wealth, status, hypocrisy, and false virtue. And to me, it's best to understand what cynicism means by looking at a person who always was kind of an idol to me, like the ultimate cynic, if you will, Diogenes of Sinope. He was born around 412 BCE in a small Greek colony on the Black Sea, and his father was a banker who, according to legend, was exiled for debasing the city's coins, which is basically taking the precious metals of the coins and diluting it, making more coins out of it, and hence basically counterfeiting coins. When they came to Athens, Diogenes encountered the philosopher Antisthenes, a student of Socrates who preached virtue through self-sufficiency. Diogenes took that idea to its most radical extreme. If civilization corrupts, then the only honest life is the simplest one. So he renounced all possessions and slept in a pythos, a giant clay storage jar that later became known as a barrel. And in this way he lived publicly in the Athenian marketplace, eating, sleeping, and even relieving himself without shame. And when he was mocked as dog-like for his shamelessness, he embraced the insult, calling himself a cynic, from kynikos, of the dog. And why I like this guy so much is for shenanigans like wandering through the city in broad daylight with a lantern to look for an honest man. Or one day the great philosopher Plato stood before his students and defined man as a featherless biped, a creature walking on two legs without feathers, and the next morning Diogenes burst into the academy holding a plucked chicken, threw it on the floor and said, "Behold, it's Plato's man," thereby reducing philosophy to performance art. And I still have to laugh about this because one of my favorite pranks in high school to this day was writing on a piece of paper Who threw the salami on the ceiling and passing it through the ranks, laughing at everyone who looked up, to be joined in more laughter as everyone else who fell for it then laughed at the others who came next. It was a stupid joke, but the best part was when the teacher finally had enough of the commotion, picked up the piece of paper and read it, and proceeded to look at the ceiling themselves. I can't really tell you why I think that prank is genius, but to me it always has been. Anyway, back to Diogenes. He lived truth so bluntly that it embarrassed everyone around him. And my absolute favorite story about him is when Alexander the Great, curious about this notorious beggar sage, stood before him and asked if there was anything he could do for him. Diogenes, lounging in the sunlight, looked up and replied, "Yes, get out of my sun." Like, I don't know if there's a better line in human history. But the point of all of this is that originally cynicism wasn't negativity. It was freedom from illusion, seeing through society's lies, radical simplicity, integrity, and those are the virtues I still to this day unironically hold in the highest regard. And never in my life did my cynicism bring me anything but joy, insight, and, well, fun. But recently, it's not as fun anymore. It feels like in the face of AI Slop and the, sorry to say, sheer uselessness of apps like Sora 2 as the product of what was promised to leap us forward as humanity, that my cynicism was becoming not only useless, but bitter. Where in the past it made me creative and witty, it now just made me blank and sad. But why? What exactly is changing that results in that? Society still is full of illusions, inauthenticity, and, well, quite honestly, enough material to mock. I thought maybe I will find the answer when looking at how the concept of cynicism itself had developed over time, because just as myself, cynicism isn't what it used to be in ancient Greece. After all, when we today say, don't be so cynical, we don't mean, don't be so authentic and integer. We mean, don't be such a buzzkill. So how did that happen? Well, cynicism always developed alongside us humans, and it all started with Nietzsche, another German ruining our day, by making meaning collapse. In the late 19th century, the industrialization was redrawing the map of existence. Cities exploded, religion faded, science reigned. Darwin had dethroned divine purpose, and machines replaced human rhythm. And it was in this new world where Nietzsche saw the death of God, not as a murder, but an evaporation. The shared moral cosmos that held Europe together dissolved into efficiency and capital, like the factory replaced the cathedral and utility replaced transcendence. Cynicism first appeared as a spiritual exhaustion, the sense that everything sacred could be priced, measured, or explained away. But Nietzsche's challenge wasn't despair, it was creative defiance. If meaning dies, he implied, become its author. The modern world's first existential choice, to rot in irony or build your own faith from the ruins. Then around the turn of the 20th century, Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud saw the suspicion in cynicism as liberation. Yes, the new gods were money and mind, but Marx watched industrial Europe grind people into hands, labor reduced to numbers. He exposed how morality itself masked economic interest. Virtue became obedience dressed as ethics. At the same time, Freud mapped the unconscious, revealing that even our noblest intentions hid repressed drives. The self was no longer transparent, consciousness was a stage play of disguises. Cynicism here felt like intelligence, the thrill of seeing behind the curtain. The early modern mind learned to smirk. Yet both thinkers offered an exit. Use knowledge to liberate, not to sneer. Awareness without empathy becomes its own cage. But as ideology and repression were unmasked, sincerity began to look naive. In the mid-20th century, we then entered the political death spiral, because after 2 world wars, cynicism wasn't intellectual anymore. It was cultural trauma. The historian and philosopher Hannah Arendt lived through propaganda, genocide, and the weaponization of truth itself. The radio and the newspaper had created the first truly mass-mediated world, and with them, mass manipulation. When every narrative is propaganda, the public stops believing altogether. Totalitarianism thrived not on faith, but on fatigue. Arendt's warning was surgical. Disbelief can be as dangerous as blind belief. The world collapses not only when people obey lies, but when they stop trusting any truth. Her cure wasn't optimism, but action. Rebuilding shared reality through participation, through speech, through the courage to appear in public again. But cynicism became fatigued. Yet it wasn't all lost for cynicism, because Albert Camus, also in the mid-20th century, offered a different response. After the disillusionment of war, Camus offered a different response. Acceptance without surrender. He lived in a Europe where ideology had killed millions and faith had burned out. The world's absurdity was naked, yet he refused to despair. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, he wrote, finding dignity not in belief but in defiance. Sisyphus was the guy who got punished by the gods to forever drag a stone up a hill, for it to slip out of his grip and rolling down the hill again just before he managed to get it up. I sometimes wonder if he is still doing that today. I guess he is. But then in the 1980s and 1990s, cynicism kind of got sold. The Cold War ended, capitalism won, and yet the victory felt hollow. Consumer culture promised liberation through lifestyle. MTV irony replaced ideology. Nike told us to just do it. But do what, bro? Like, do what? Like, what do you want me to do? Peter Sloterdijk diagnosed the modern subject as fully aware, endlessly complicit. We know the ads lie, but we buy anyway. We recycle while flying low cost across continents. We joke about politics we no longer vote in. This is enlightened false consciousness. Cynicism as cultural inability to act. Knowledge without consequence, and humor without subversion. And the last blow to cynicism came in the 2000s and 2010s, formulated by Byung, Chul as something you might call the burnout of cool. The internet's oxygen was irony. Every authenticity was monetized, outrage gamified, and selfhood optimized. Social media made confession a performance and rebellion a brand. Han saw cynicism mutate into exhaustion. We no longer fight oppression, we internalize it. Productivity replaces ideology. We exploit ourselves in the name of freedom. Depression becomes the new dissent. In the always-on neoliberal world, negativity disappears. No enemies, only competition. Without friction, there's no depth. The solution, Han says, is radical slowness, rediscovering sincerity, silence, contemplation. To outlive cynicism, we must again risk believing, even if only in the unquantifiable. And then came AI. Maybe you missed it, but AI has changed quite some things around here. We are knee-deep in algorithmic slop. Everything online feels like it was written by the same machine trying to sound human. AI floods every feed with recycled faces, fake facts, and bullshit. Sorry, but that's what it is. Why do I need to see a racist video about fried chicken or a stolen coin or showers? A video that was made by no one, needed by no one, and does nothing, except maybe nonchalance harming these groups of people. Like, hey Sora 2, give me some racist stuff so I don't have to make it myself. Like, What? And I'm sorry I have to say this, but if you are one of these people who make videos like that, just know, on the path you are on right now, your life has no purpose. I don't know what mindless consumerism of planted a seed in your head that might be a funny idea or even worth a second of your life. Just know you have been lied to, like in a big way. And I say it again, on this path, your life has no purpose. So change it. That was a bit dark, but you know, it's true. Anyway, the web has become a landfill of content built on people desperately feeding prompts into engines that don't care for audiences that mostly don't even exist. Search results are SEO soup. TikTok is a self-repetitious garbage dump. News sites give us AI summaries of AI summaries. Nobody is speaking anymore. It's all a weird glitch of a person, a bot, a marketing intern, and a hallucinated byproduct of some code. It's not even dystopia, it's worse, it's just so boring. The amount of time you have to spend nowadays to find something remotely original, like even on this platform, you are pressed into predictable crap. The algorithm pushes your video if it can confidently predict who will like it. Let that sink in for a minute. The algorithm on this platform will push your video only if it can confidently predict who will like it. No surprises for the audience, no expansion of horizons, nothing. Except predictability. This is, by the way, why my views suck so hard, because sometimes I want to make a video about Fallout ghouls and sometimes about the abstract concept of cynicism. If that means that they get buried and I talk to my 3 channel members and 5 regular viewers, so be it. Shout out, by the way. I hope you have your coffee ready. Anyway, the point is, every tool that promised creativity ended up automating its corpse. Everything is fast, cheap, infinite, and pointless. We used to fear machines replacing humans, and now we've become the janitors of the machine's imagination, cleaning up its endless trash. And in a world like that, cynicism no longer works. Why? Because cynicism needs intent. In a world of AI-driven economies, politics and media, cynicism loses its object. Cynicism depends on intentionality, the assumption that someone is actively trying to deceive, to manipulate, or to pretend. But as we just said, AI systems are indifferent. They do not have intent, no matter what some tinfoil-wearing fearmonger is trying to tell you. And they train us every day more and more not to have intent as well, just to click the slot machine and wait what kind of poop comes out. When the algorithm recommends outrage, it's not hypocritical, it's mechanical. When it manipulates opinion, it does so without belief or motive. Of course, there are people behind it that eventually benefit from all this, but we don't see them. And we will see them even less. They built this system so they can forever disappear behind a wall of AI slop, wearing us out and numbing us into compliance. Cynicism, which is so fun, because it unmasks power by exposing hypocrisy, becomes useless against non-human processes that have no inner life to expose. AI doesn't care, it doesn't desire, doesn't contradict itself, and therefore the emotional charge of cynicism evaporates in a system where no one is lying because no one believes anything anyways. As Hannah Arendt predicted, we now believe there is no truth. Just to say, you know, for the record, there is a truth. And always will be. But it's not only Hannah Arendt on steroids, it's also Sloterdijk on Viagra. I don't know how to say his name. Sloterdijk, Sloterdijk. It's funny though. Viagra. Anyway, because in Critique of Cynical Reason in 1983, Peter Sloterdijk defined modern cynicism as they know what they are doing and yet they do it. In the age of AI, this collapses to no one knows what they're doing and yet it happens. The chain of moral accountability disintegrates. There is no they left to expose, only distributed agency, a web of users and data and machine learning loops. Cynicism becomes performance art with no audience, a rebellion staged inside the machine that doesn't even notice. And I think the worst part for me, as someone who likes to make entertaining videos with this cynicism, is irony relies on a shared sense of what's serious and what's not. AI culture, automated humor, deepfakes, Sora 2 slop, dissolves that shared context. You can't be ironic in a feed that doesn't understand tone. So the traditional cynicism, where someone observes corruption and refuses to be fooled, is being stripped on both ends, because the corrupter becomes invisible and the observer becomes atomized. If you saw a man today in your feed living in a barrel in Athens, you wouldn't think of Diogenes, but what a bad AI render. Without a who to accuse or a we to stand together, cynicism can no longer form community. And that was always the most fun part, because the people who laugh at cynicism with you are your people. And we're losing this community. So the video was titled, "If you struggle with cynicism." And if you do, let me tell you, you are not struggling with cynicism, you are struggling with the world. Don't let anybody tell you that the original cynicism, the unmasking of inauthenticity and the absolute imperative of integrity is the problem. Just understand that what we are facing is non-human. So if you do struggle, don't buy it, don't like it, don't share it. Vote with your attention and don't give it any. If the ones in power show you a screen, look them in the eyes instead. Search for community and human interaction wherever you can, because there is one remaining facet of cynicism I kept for last, and unfortunately it's cheesily called re-enchantment. Re-enchantment isn't the opposite of cynicism. It's its return into the barrel, back to Diogenes. When today's cynicism burns itself out, when we manage to outlive that version, what remains is not emptiness, but a clearing where authenticity can return. This is what Martin Heidegger, the 20th century, also German, I don't know what's with the Germans today, philosopher of being, spent his life trying to remind us of. That truth is not a concept to be owned, but an experience to be awakened into. The most thought-provoking thing in our thought-provoking time, he wrote, is that we are still not thinking. For Heidegger, modern life had become a machinery of explanation, efficient, brilliant, but hollow. A world that had forgotten how to dwell. Re-enchantment in that sense means learning to think again in the original ancient way, with wonder, with humanity, with presence. It's what Diogenes practiced before cynicism turned into what you are feeling today. We need to live truth, be it by plugging a chicken or telling Alexander the Great into his face to get out of our sun. To re-enchant the world is to return to that first gesture of integrity, standing in the sunlight, unguarded, needing nothing, and realizing that the very act of deciding where to look is the way out, for you and for all of us. And while speaking of looking, are you 100% sure that you do not have a salami stuck on your ceiling? Just asking. Might be worth a look. Thank you for watching this video. I like making videos about different stuff, and here's different stuff. And shout out to the Epic Opaque channel members. Your support literally brings me joy every single day. Thank you. And see you next time.